Most of you aren't subscribed. Make sure to subscribe, as it helps out the channel. Without further ado, the show opens with our MC Taro Sakamoto, a highly respected hitman, seen coldly marching through enemy territory. Spotting several men firing at him, Sakamoto nonchalantly deflects the projectiles, dashing through the men only to dispatch them one by one. As Sakamoto heads deeper into enemy lines, he continues to brandish his skills, feared by every gangster, but also admired by every hitman. One day while shopping, Sakamoto ran into Aoi, the love of his life. Having fallen in love, Sakamoto quit his life as a hitman and got married to Aoi only to help give birth to Hana. Now living the life of a family man, we cut to the present where Sakamoto runs a convenience store, but outside a blonde kid states he's finally tracked down Sakamoto. Hard at work, Sakamoto watches as a kid draws a target on his store's sliding doors, asking for a free juice box if he hits a bullseye. With Aoi and Hana watching the boy miss, the boy asks for another go, accidentally spilling some of his calligraphy ink on a businessman that enters the store. Annoyed, the businessman prepares to punish the boy, but Sakamoto steps in, scaring the businessman with his sheer aura. Sakamoto had prepared to assassinate the businessman with a pen, but luckily no violence was needed. But everyone suddenly notices a blonde boy in his store. The boy compliments Sakamoto's readiness to assassinate the businessman, personally introducing himself as Shin the Psychic, but Sakamoto thinks of incapacitating Shin with a single blow to the head. Sensing his demise, Shin reassures Sakamoto that he's here to talk, sitting down only to confirm that Sakamoto had indeed given up on his hitman life. Seeing Sakamoto with a round body, Shin reminds Sakamoto he was once the legendary hitman, begging Sakamoto to return to his duties. As Sakamoto slurps up some instant noodles, Shin chooses to smoke to relieve some stress, but in an instant Sakamoto splits Shin's cigarette into two, reminding Shin they're in a no-smoking zone. Realizing that Sakamoto hasn't lost his touch since he's retired, Sakamoto is suddenly called by an older man for a favor, making Shin wonder if Sakamoto is only disguising as a civilian. Having reached the older man's backyard, Sakamoto instantly gets to work cutting down a tree. Next, Sakamoto is asked by a lady to help feed her picky daughter some vegetables, managing to use a silver spoon to feed her. Finally, Sakamoto sees two boys fighting over who gets to play with a ball, choosing to split the ball into two with his bare hands, solving the issue. As Sakamoto takes a break, Shin realizes Sakamoto is a handyman for the whole town, praising Sakamoto for concealing his identity so well, but Shin still thinks Sakamoto has fallen so far from his legendary status. Heading to his car, Shin notes how it's only been 5 years since he's seen Sakamoto, still admiring Sakamoto for being so awesome, wishing for the day Sakamoto returns. Suddenly receiving a call from his boss, Shin reports that he had failed to convince Sakamoto to return, but the boss asks if Shin had eliminated Sakamoto for betraying them. Shin tries to convince the boss to leave Sakamoto alone, but the boss reminds Shin he'll be eliminated and replaced if he fails. That night, Shin washes up, thinking back on his missions with Sakamoto, knowing he should be the one to put his old partner down. Heading back to the store the next day, Shin walks past Aoi, Hana, and the boy playing, apologizing in advance. Upon entering Sakamoto's store, Shin tells Sakamoto he'll be leaving town today, choosing to pull out his gun as he bids farewell to Sakamoto. Seeing Shin pull the trigger, Sakamoto chooses to spit his cough drop as Shin's bullet, deflecting it onto a bag of chips on the counter. Trying to reload, Shin is distracted by an ice cream flung at him, but suddenly realizes that Sakamoto has disappeared. Cautiously scanning the aisles, Sakamoto manages to distract Shin by making some noise in one of the aisles, only to make use of a rubber band and some cough drops to snipe Shin through the shelves. Rushing to evade Sakamoto's cough drops, Shin and Sakamoto catch a glance of each other at the end of the aisle, but Sakamoto tosses a cream puff at Shin, obstructing his vision. Having bought enough time, Sakamoto sneaks up from behind, winding up a torrential kick that sends Shin flying through several shelves, reminding Shin of when he used to train with Sakamoto. As Shin falls unconscious, he suddenly awakens a few hours later, spotting Hana and Aoi relieved to see him awake, learning he had been brought to the second floor of Sakamoto's store. Seeing Sakamoto's loving family, Shin gets weirded out, confused as to why they're serving him a lovely meal even after his assassination attempt. Believing the food to be poisoned, Shin chooses to face the challenge head-on, but instead begins breaking down, grateful to be served such a delicious and hearty meal. Finally understanding why Sakamoto retired, Shin and Sakamoto head outside, prompting Shin to graciously thank Sakamoto and his family for taking care of him. With Sakamoto asking Shin to come again soon, we cut to later that night, where Shin sits before his boss and his gang, begging his boss to let Sakamoto live. The boss and his henchmen scoff at such a pathetic request, reminding Shin that Sakamoto must be eliminated, having abandoned their organization. But Shin offers to give his life for Sakamoto. With the boss accepting Shin's offer, the boss secretly thinks about how gullible Shin is, but having already expected the boss to lie to him, Shin turns his gun on the boss. As Shin begins a shootout with his former organization, we cut to Sakamoto listening in on their conversation, choosing to transform his convenience store into an armory littered with deadly weapons. As Sakamoto opts for a stun gun, we cut back to Shin, who slowly begins dismantling the enemies, switching from his gun to martial arts to dispatch the men. Unfortunately, Shin is caught off guard, struck by a bazooka, but still manages to run for cover. With the men rallying together, the boss reminds everyone that Shin is a psychic, meaning he can read people's minds if they're close enough. Continuing his onslaught, Shin takes out a few more men, realizing he has a single magazine left, ultimately getting struck in the leg by a bullet. Falling onto his knees, Shin is surrounded, finally giving up. Luckily, Sakamoto appears, paralyzing the men surrounding Shin. As the boss orders his men to take out Sakamoto, Sakamoto nonchalantly opens a pair of chopsticks, increasing his speed to knock out the men, all whilst flexing he can catch the bullets with chopsticks. Spotting a man wielding a katana, Sakamoto easily evades, kicking the man aside only to block a spray of bullets with pins, slaying the gunman with said pins. Cleaning up the remaining gunmen, Sakamoto locks onto the boss and his remaining henchmen, running to evade the projectiles only to slay the boss with a single slash. With Shin reminded of why he respects Sakamoto so much, Shin realizes Sakamoto had bugged his gun when he was unconscious and is suddenly offered a job by Sakamoto. Sakamoto says he'll pay Shin 800 yen an hour. Cutting to the next day, where Shin has started on his first day, asking Sakamoto to not eat ramen, especially since they're low on stock. As Hana and Aoi compliment Shin's new apron, Shin makes use of his psychic abilities to help out an elderly lady, but is threatened by Sakamoto to keep their past a secret from the others.